Welcome to the Art of Gracious Living. I've got a real exciting pair of boots to show you today. These are Maine Mountain Moccasin brand. Maine Mountain Moccasin brand was a short-lived shoe company based in Lewiston, Maine that manufactured hand-sewn moccasin-style shoes and boots. They were formed in 2012, and their Instagram, which is now, well, I would say it's inactive, been inactive for about 4 years, as well as their website. Shows a great deal of activity at the time of their founding in 2012 by two guys, Dan Hesselton and Greg Cordero. Cordero left, and what they had originally called the New England Outerwear Company rebranded itself into Maine Mountain Moccasins sometime prior to 2016. And their original concept was that they were going to be, a niche heritage, made in America, full range men's clothing and accessories brand. And that shoes would be a significant part of their operations, but that they also had much higher aspirations to make it a full-blown men's clothing brand. They refocused and became an exclusively hand-sewn moccasin style company. They had their factory in Lewiston and really fitted themselves in well with the Lewiston Auburn hand-sewn moccasin tradition. They used a lot of local craftspeople, most of whom were now at that point getting quite aged. And they really focused on true hand-sewn constructions, small batch production, and using premium leathers, primarily from Horween and the Tasman Leather Group, which at the time was operating in Hartland, Maine, the last Maine tannery. So these were unusual in that they were 100% Maine made. Made in Maine, sewn in Maine, and much of the leather was sourced in Maine. So let's take a look at these boots, these shoes. These are a pair of chukkas, and this is Tasman leather. It's rough out. As you can see, the inside is the flesh side, the hide side, and the outside is the flesh side. It's very substantial, gorgeous, gorgeous rough out leather. As you can see, proudly labeled Made in Maine. These are my size 11.5D. They fit great, very comfortable. And this particular pair that I bought on eBay was very, very lightly used. It's hard to see, but you can perhaps see the outline of the original Maine Mountain Moccasin logo on the insole. But that's not what's exciting about these boots. What's really exciting about them is that they are really an extinct unicorn of a hand-sewn piece of footwear. And the reason I say that is, first of all, Tasman Leather Group in Hartland has closed permanently. There are no more Tasman leathers coming out of Maine, and there probably will never be. That plant is defunct. So this is an extinct leather made in Maine. Tasman still operates in other states, and they still make fine quality leather, but the last of the Maine-made leather is gone. But even more exciting than that is the surprise. These are leather-soled, hand-sewn moccasin shoes, which is something that you almost never see. And they actually have, I would say, less wear than they look like. Leather soles do begin to look rough pretty quick, but as you can see, none of the stitching is anywhere near worn through. And the majority of even the outer bits of the leather are really in excellent shape. So I consider these to be in very, very good to excellent condition. I bet these weren't worn more than a half a dozen times. The leather itself on the outside is flawless. There is a little bit of wear on the insoles, mostly at the heels. So these have been worn, but really I was thrilled to get them. They look great and they're super comfortable. I just love them. Setting aside the rarity of them and the fact that these are no longer made, will never be replicated, and I think it's unlikely that another shoe company will come out with a leather-soled hand-sewn. That's just such a niche type of product. Maybe Yucatan would do it, but I'm not so sure. I think that the desirability of it, I mean, people, this is the way hand-sewn moccasins were made for hundreds of years. These are just the most traditional build that you can find in a hand-sewn moccasin shoe or boot. This represents a tradition of Maine hand-sewn shoes that predates the takeover of the industry by Vibram and their rubber soles. Now you're hard-pressed to find a pair of hand-sewn, certainly made in Maine, that aren't put together with a Vibram outsole. But this is the way they made them in the old days, and I just think it's really cool to have a pair like this. Are they going to give you the same grippiness as a pair of Vibrams? No. Are they going to be as water resistant as a pair of Vibrams? No. Are they going to be more breathable? Heck yes. And there's something about the sound of leather shoes on a wood floor that is just very satisfying. I love that sound. So, whatever became of Maine Mountain Moccasins? Well, as I said, they were very active in 2012, 2013. They offered shoes that were made to order or ready to wear through 2016, 2017, and they probably peaked around 2018. They also made what I consider to be possibly the seeds of their downfall, which is that they chose to be not only a direct-to-consumer online brand, but they wanted and did, in fact, sell to wholesale purchasers, exclusive heritage men's retail outlets on the West Coast and Boston and around the country. So they had a wholesale business and a direct-to-consumer retail business. I think if they'd stuck with the direct-to-consumer retail business, they would certainly have avoided the availability problems that they had. They took money for a bunch of pre-orders and started to get some real negative feedback during COVID. People who just weren't getting their shoes that they'd paid for, that they'd pre-ordered, all sorts of complaints on Reddit about poor customer service, which I don't really blame a company that's struggling for not being particularly on the ball when it comes to customer service. Of course, there's really no excuse for it, but at the same time, I can see where when you're really struggling to stay afloat, sometimes returning emails to customers with bad news becomes a real struggle and a low priority. So I feel bad for the guys that ran it. And then COVID hit, and for whatever combination of reasons, COVID, and I suspect they also had a terrible, terrible problem with getting enough labor to do this hand sewing. Really starting, in the 2015 era and on, you had an expansion of these businesses. They all took a hit in COVID, but you had a couple factors that were at work. You had a limited number of trained hand sewers. This is an art. This is not something that is easily taught. It requires years of apprenticeship to really master the art of hand sewing shoes. And the guys that were doing it were just aging out. A lot of them had retired. The heyday of this industry was the 60s. So you're talking guys that are in their 60s, 70s, and above that were the mainstay of the Lewiston shoe industry. And so probably there was a great difficulty getting enough people to come in and do the work and get the shoes out the door. They certainly did make a lot of shoes, but when you start getting into a production pinch, You really have to make a decision whether you're going to be a direct-to-consumer seller or whether you are going to be a wholesaler. And I think that they probably wanted to take care of their wholesale customers first, and they made sure that they had product on the shelves in all these fancy boutiques all over the country, but at the same time, unfortunately, not being able to fulfill their obligations to their direct sale customers. And it's the direct sale customers that are your brand's real supporters, your real core base of fans. And if a brand can't develop fans and maintain fans in a niche micro manufacturing industry like this, you're never going to make it. You know, those people that strolled into a store in New York City, you know, and buy a pair of shoes that are on the shelf that look cool, and yeah, they're Maine Mountain Moccasins, that's all well and good, but they're not the enthusiasts. The enthusiasts are the ones who are on Reddit, who are spreading word of mouth, and you got to take care. So, unfortunately, in about 2020, Maine Mountain Moccasins put up on their website and on their Instagram page that they were done. It was all over. And there continue to be promises on their webpage of a final liquidation sale. So there may be some future yet, some new opportunities to buy the remaining stock. Somehow I doubt it. I think that the days of Maine Mountain Moccasins is over. And it's a shame because they were really, really in the same vein as Yucatan. They came out with some wild stuff. I mean, just the idea of a leather-soled Handsewn moccasin chukka boot with roughout leather. You know, that's just out there. That is so niche and so cool. They also did other builds with pony skin and all sorts of, you know, fancy, what I would consider to be fancy stitching, like baseball stitch, hand sews, all sorts of great stuff. So I highly recommend Maine Mountain Moccasins. It's a rare brand. You can find them used. You can occasionally find them on Poshmark and eBay. And I recommend you snap them up because they ain't making any more of them. And especially they're not making any more with this rare Maine sourced leather from the good old Irving Tannery. And the Irving Tannery requires a word or two. Irving Tannery was really the lifeblood of a little town up in Somerset County called Hartland. And Hartland, it was all about the tannery. It was originally a woolen mill up until the mid-30s. It closed during the Depression. And miraculously, Irving Tannery moved into the old woolen mill in 1935. And boy, that was a lifeblood. And Hartland became one of the few towns in Maine that didn't suffer from the Depression. They thrived as a result of the Irving Tannery. And they did, you know, their heyday was probably the 80s when they did a major expansion of the physical plant. But again, a cycle of industrial rise and fall hit Hartland and the Irving Tannery, and they were sold in the 2010s to a company by the name of Tasman Leather Group. And Tasman is a national tannery. They have tanneries in a number of other locations in the country, but they decided to take a chance on Hartland and the old Irving Tannery factory, and they actually put a lot of money into it, but COVID killed them too. So COVID was the end of Tasman in Hartland in the old Irving Tannery. The final machinery was removed just last year, and as unfortunately is the case with so many of these old heavy heritage industries around the country, the site is extremely contaminated. Canning is a very dirty process, and tanneries, while they're great for the local economy, are just not great for the environment. The Maine state government has promised to make considerable effort to clean it up and do something with the site. Once it's cleaned up, it could be a desirable site for redevelopment, but Hartland is a pretty sad place now. And I'll tell you, visited Hartland. I have been in Hartland. I haven't been to Hartland for probably 30 years, but even 30 years ago, back, around 1995, 1997, it was a pretty impoverished little town. And now Hartland is a shadow of its former self. It's a shame because Great Moose Lake is there. It's a pretty little lake. There's some mountains that begin just beyond the lake. So rest in peace, Irving Tannery, and hopefully there'll be something new to take its place soon. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.